In October of 2007, a young woman responded to an ad on Craigslist posted by a shady and mysterious person. Only one day later, that woman would be found deceased in the trunk of her own car. This is the case of Catherine Olson. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also chasing waterfalls. You know, some people say not to do this, but I just can't help myself. But anyway, today we're going over the case of Catherine Olson, a promising young woman who fell into a sinister trap. And just a warning, this case is absolutely brutal and distressing to say the least. Catherine Ann Olson was born on September 16th of 1983 in Minnesota. While not much is available about her early childhood, by the time she was a teenager, she had already grown into a very bright, kind, and trusting person. After graduating from high school in 2002 as co-valedictorian, Catherine soon began attending St. Olaf College in Northfield. Here, she majored in theater and Hispanic studies and graduated in 2006. Following that, her interests largely remained the same. By 2007, Catherine was performing in her local church theater. Recently, she had even starred as the character Maria in a performance of The Sound of Music. Additionally, Catherine was entirely fluent in Spanish. She had considered becoming an interpreter at one point, but ultimately decided against this. According to her family, Catherine had been to several foreign countries, including Egypt and Argentina. But when she wasn't singing, traveling the world, or being educated, Catherine found solace in either hanging out with friends or doing part-time nannying jobs. She had yet to find her dream job, but she did love children. So babysitting was something she felt comfortable doing in the meantime. And the way that Catherine typically found these gigs was through a website called Craigslist. For those that don't know, Craigslist is a website where people post their own personal advertisements for items and services, and then others respond. Naturally, Catherine's family didn't exactly love her use of this sometimes shady website. But despite her family's fears, she still used it on a relatively regular basis. The location and circumstances of the gigs she accepted varied greatly. For one babysitting job, Catherine had traveled all the way to the country of Turkey. According to her father, she always assumed the best in people. And up to a certain point, she had little reason not to. Practically everyone that she had encountered over Craigslist had been friendly and kind. However, that was about to change. Now, for context purposes, it's important to note that Catherine lived in an apartment with at least one other roommate. So shortly before October 25th of 2007, she was on her computer searching through Craigslist for a new babysitting gig. After browsing through for a bit, she ultimately found an ad by a person named Amy. Now, Amy claimed to be married with kids. She said that her and her husband had just recently moved to the Twin Cities and were looking for a babysitter. Soon, Catherine responded to the ad and started a correspondence with this Amy person. And before long, Amy asked Catherine if she could babysit a child between the hours of 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Thursday, October 25th. Catherine accepted the offer, but according to her roommates, she said something felt a bit off about the gig. It's not clear why, but she apparently claimed that this Amy individual seemed kind of strange. Regardless, once October 25th rolled around, Catherine got out of bed in the morning, said goodbye to her roommates, and then drove to the town of Savage. When she got to the right neighborhood, she then drove up to the house and parked her car. Afterwards, Catherine walked up to the home and knocked on the door. But little could she have ever expected the amount of evil waiting for her on the other side. On Friday, October 26th of 2007, a person strolling through a park in Savage called Warren Butler Park discovered a purse in a garbage can. Shortly after, the person notified an employee at the park about it, and in turn, this employee contacted the local police. Now, initially, police thought that it may have just been a theft. So once they poured out the contents inside and discovered who the purse belonged to, they called the person's home and left a message. Hours later, around 5 p.m. on that same day, one of the people living at the home called the police back. The person said that the woman who owned the purse was their roommate, and they hadn't seen her since 8 a.m. Thursday morning. The woman had apparently left to interview for a babysitting job in Savage and never returned home. As for her identity, well, her name was Catherine Ann Olson, and she was 24 years old. Meanwhile, as police were beginning an investigation into where Catherine was, her family was becoming increasingly concerned. They hadn't spoken to her for an entire day. Naturally, this was very much unlike her, because she always made sure to keep in frequent contact with her friends and her family. Soon, Catherine's sister asked her roommate about where Catherine was. However, they gave the same response to her as they did the police. Then before long, Catherine's family were also getting phone calls from the police. So as time passed, what began as an investigation into who was missing a purse became an investigation into a missing person. Soon, authorities returned to Warren Butler Park and revisited the garbage can the purse was found in. Inside, they recovered a trash bag with an extremely bloody towel in it. Wrapped inside the towel was a cell phone that had been smashed. Now, clearly, these items were already highly suspicious, but as police continued their search, it became far worse. After finding the towel, they scoured the area in and around the park. Despite searching practically everywhere, though, they didn't find anything of substance. So next, they resorted to looking through Catherine's cell phone and credit card records. Once again, they found very little at first. But following these unsuccessful efforts, authorities eventually deployed a helicopter for a more expansive aerial view of the area in and around Warren Butler Park. In the air, the pilot discovered an abandoned car a few blocks away from the park. The car was in the parking lot of a place known as Rudy Kramer Nature Preserve in Burnsville. Once police went to search the vehicle, right away they made a shocking and heartbreaking discovery. Lying lifeless inside of the trunk was Catherine Olson, a girl filled with so much potential and brilliance, now gone for an unexplainable reason. But at this point, the investigation once again evolved into something worse. A murder investigation. Luckily, police were very proactive. Soon, they were able to track down the exact address of where Catherine had last been seen. It was, of course, the person who posted the babysitting ad. But who actually lived at this house? Well, there wasn't any women named Amy, that's for sure. And while there was a married couple, they definitely didn't move to the home anytime recently. As it turns out, the only person in the home on the day of Catherine's disappearance was a 19-year-old man named Michael John Anderson. So naturally, Michael was the main suspect right off the bat. Just a little background about him. Michael was born on October 16th of 1988. While not much information is available about his early childhood, we do know a bit about his late adolescence. The high school he attended is known as Cedar Alternative High School. Here, Michael studied auto mechanics, but dropped out in 2006. After that, he took a few different jobs at auto parts warehouses, before ultimately finding a job as a jet fueler at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. Michael still lived with his parents, and according to friends, he seemed to be a relatively normal guy. He was never violent or aggressive, and hardly ever took interest in any women. His main hobby outside of cars was mainly video games, paintball, and archery. But another thing Michael did do every now and again was use a certain website called Craigslist. Here, he would both post ads himself and respond to other ads. Now, most of the time, it was in relation to motor vehicles, but as you'll soon learn, he eventually tried out a much different type of ad. Regardless, once police entered Michael's parents' home, the same address that Catherine last visited, they quickly discovered evidence proving that something terrible had happened there. In various locations around the home, police found blood splatter. This included the stairs leading up to the second floor and hallway, but was perhaps most prevalent in Michael Anderson's bedroom. In fact, Michael's bedroom had blood all over the walls and the mattress. On top of this, police located a .357 handgun along with shell casings. Then, upon interviewing one of the neighbors, a witness reported seeing Catherine's car parked outside of the Andersons' house for several hours on Thursday. So with all of this evidence, police were confident that they had more than enough to arrest Michael Anderson. But as these things usually go, Michael was not exactly about ready to give himself up. Late Friday evening, police visited the airport where he worked at and arrested him. During his interview with authorities, Michael attempted to repudiate every piece of evidence one by one. When police asked him if he had any involvement in Catherine's death, he of course denied the idea altogether. Additionally, he denied having any phone contact with her. However, cell records showed that she indeed had called him Thursday morning. Next, police asked him about his use of Craigslist and when the last time he used it was. Michael claimed that he hadn't used the website since January, but the email address connected to the ad Catherine responded to matched Michael's email address. Michael tried refuting this by saying that he shared an email with his mother and a few friends. But then ultimately, police provided some evidence that there was no way Michael could refute. That included the blood on the walls, the handgun, and a piece of evidence that literally had his name written all over it. What I'm referring to, of course, is the bloody towel found in the garbage can earlier. This towel literally had Michael's name written on it in black marker. So at this point, Michael should have just thrown in the towel, but instead he continued to resist. He argued that yes, he had witnessed Catherine's murder, but that he wasn't the one who did it. He said that it was a friend of his who murdered her, with the reason being that they, quote unquote, thought it would be funny. What a despicable lie to make up. Anyway, before long, Michael was placed in a local jail while awaiting what would be a strenuous trial. In the meantime, the authorities did their best to piece together exactly what happened the morning of Catherine's murder. Now, as you'll recall, Catherine woke up and drove to Michael's parents' house. When she walked up and knocked on the door, the person that answered was Michael. At the time, neither of his parents were home. His father was a truck driver on the road, and his mother, it's unclear where she was. But once Catherine stepped inside the home, Michael somehow convinced her to walk up the stairs to his bedroom. After that, he got out a .357 Magnum revolver, and Catherine attempted to escape. But the moment she turned and began running, Michael shot her in the back. Then, as she lay dying, he dragged her all the way down the steps and tied her ankles together using red twine. Additionally, Michael smashed Catherine's cell phone and used a bunch of towels to clean up most of the blood on the floor. Next, he put Catherine in a sleeping bag, picked her up, and put her in the trunk of her own car. It was daytime while this was happening, but evidently nobody saw any of it. Regardless, once Michael put Catherine in the trunk, he then drove her car 5 blocks away to Kramer Nature Preserve in Burnsville. After that, he parked in the parking lot and got out of the car with 2 of her personal belongings. This included her purse and her phone, in which he wrapped in a bloody towel that had his name written on it. And then finally, shortly after, Michael walked up to a garbage can in Warren Butler Park, which is just a few blocks away, and threw Catherine's belongings inside. Meanwhile, Catherine bled out in the trunk of her own car. She was holding a pearl earring in her hands when she died because she had detached it from her ear. But when Michael ultimately got home later after committing such a disgusting and heinous act, he very casually asked his mom if she could wash his jacket. He claimed he had gotten oil on it from work, but in reality, it was blood. Anyway, a little over a day later, Michael was locked up and sitting in a jail cell with a $1 million bail. When his trial finally rolled around in early 2009, the defense argued that the murder was accidental. They said Michael couldn't be completely held liable for his actions because he had a form of autism known as Asperger's syndrome. Except for one problem with the argument, of course, is that millions of people have Asperger's and they don't commit murder. Ultimately, the judge ruled that the defense wasn't allowed to present this as an argument in court. Instead, much of the focus was on how Michael was a lonely, awkward young man who just wanted a girlfriend, and that while the killing was once again accidental, part of the motive was sex. Evidently, Michael had posted a few Craigslist ads in the past seeking, quote-unquote, voiced women and models. Now, this line of argument was also flawed because Catherine's autopsy showed no signs of assault. But also, throughout the trial, Michael showed no signs of empathy or remorse. At one point, when a friend asked, "Why didn't you just plead insanity?" he responded, "Because I'd have to pretend that I'm sorry." And then he smiled. So needless to say, the judge felt no empathy towards Michael either, and really just didn't buy the defense's argument about any of it, and neither did the jury. In the end, Michael John Anderson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and he's been locked up ever since. Now, this case was one of the first documented instances of a person being murdered through the use of a Craigslist ad. Because of that, the media dubbed Michael John Anderson the Craigslist Killer, and according to most sources, he's the first to receive that terrible moniker. But in my opinion, Michael deserves no little nickname nor any recognition for anything. What he did was astonishingly brutal and just plain evil. The woman he killed was an exceptional person, filled to the brim with energy and potential. Catherine Ann Olson was a rare combination of kind, likable, and intelligent. Realistically, she could have been anything she put her mind to, but instead her life was cut short for literally no reason. When Catherine's funeral proceedings took place shortly after she was found, the turnout was overwhelming. Clearly, Catherine was and still is a very beloved person. It's genuinely a shame what happened to her, and I hope her memory can continue to live on forever. Rest in peace to Catherine Ann Olson. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please subscribe and hit the like button because that's all we do. Another thing is that recently I started an all-exclusive Patreon. Here, you're given the choice of 3 tiers, and the last one allows for a Patreon-only video that's uncensored. That and the second tier allow you to have your name at the end of each High Time Crime video. This is just in case you want to support me a little further. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.